I haven't seen that, so okay.
Perhaps.
Start again.
All right, so perhaps we need to introduce us again. I'm sorry, my mistake. So I guess because we haven't do live streaming for a while. I'm sorry. All right.
That's okay.
Hello. Hello again. Okay,
Hi.
I'm Joe. Hi, hello. That's great. All right, so I'm Joe from Manga X Technology. So today I'm very happy to be invited to be here by Know My World to present here, and we have something very interesting to talk about, which is cultural competency. And also today we have some guests. So maybe you can just introduce yourself, please. So Jen.
All right, thank you. So for those just joining, we realized we already did our introductions and we forgot to go live. So that's why we were laughing at the beginning of this video. So this is round 2 of self-introductions. But thank you for being here, those of you who are joining us. Once again, my name is Genevieve. I'm the co-founder of Know My World, a global education nonprofit that focuses on social, emotional, and cultural learning. Today, I'm excited that we'll be focusing on the cultural aspect of that. And to help us with that, we have a special guest. Michelle is here joining us. She is the founder of Elephant Communications here in Taiwan. So Michelle, please introduce yourself again.
Thank you so much, Joe and Genevieve. So as they just mentioned, my name is Michelle. And I am the founder of a consultancy called Elephant Communications, or Shuangxiang Gotong. It's based in Taiwan. We work on a global basis with groups and individuals interested in developing their cultural competency and cultural awareness. We work on many different levels and many different types of programs, and I consider this to be an extremely important topic for people of all walks of life. Thank you.
Wonderful, and thank you so much for being here. And we also have, of course, Marissa joining us. And once again, we're being gentle with Marissa tonight because she just had her vaccine yesterday. So we really appreciate your time today. Thank you for being here.
好，大家好，那又到了我们每个月月底的 live 直播。那我们今天很荣幸的呢，可以邀请到 Michelle， 她是双向沟通台湾区的，就是负责人，她创办了这个，主要是在看文化之间的交流。那今天呢，因为我刚打完我第1剂的那个疫苗，所以有点昏昏的，所以我今天就是把当作是被邀请来的，所以今天最主要的就是负责的 host 就会是 Joe， 所以很好。
对，没有错哦。对，等一下，如果我们在讨论过程当中，如果想要说中文或者是说英文的话，都可以。So Marissa and I will be responsible for translating the description from Jen and Michelle. So also, I think for the past few months, we have been focusing on social and emotional learning, the 5 important competencies. And now we are going to talk about a new topic, which is cultural competency. So I think the first question is, what is cultural competency and why it is important?
Yeah. So cultural competencies is an array of various aspects of cultural understanding, or it includes cultural understanding, cultural sensitivity, cross-cultural communication, understanding and interacting with people from different cultural backgrounds than your own, understanding, recognizing your own cultural bias. Those are all different topics that kind of fall under this umbrella of cultural competencies. Michelle, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, so Genevieve explained it very well, so I'm going to use a metaphor to explain it. So if you are a fish in a fishbowl and you swim along, and you just think that the water you're swimming in is the water. In fact, you might not even recognize that it is water. So if another fish passes you by and says, "How's the water today?" would you be able to explain what the water is like if that's this water you've always been swimming in? So this is the importance about cultural competency, to be able to have the tools to recognize, oh, this is water and this water is like this and that water is like that. And how can we merge the two or enjoy both waters and be aware of them?
I have a
Yeah.
question. When you're talking about cultural competency, does it mean language ability?
That's
Okay.
yeah. Go ahead.
All
Go
right.
ahead, Michelle.
Yes and no. Yes, because language and culture are inseparable. They exist as a combination. However, just because you can speak a language fluently doesn't necessarily mean that you know how to use the language appropriately for the person or the group from a certain cultural background. So I would say that both are important. You need a combination. However, certainly understanding a language does help you understand how people tend to communicate. So it does begin the process, but it doesn't complete it, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah,
好，
that's a
那我
good
再用
explanation.
中文补充一点好了。那其实呢，就是当我们在讲文化的时候呢，我们要知道文化它其实算是很大很大的东西，那它其实包含了很多不同的要素。那我们简单来说的话，它第一个包含可能是觉察，对于说，诶，你对这个文化呢有些什么样的感觉，包含是自身的文化，还有他人的文化。所以你看有没有感觉跟社会情绪有那么一点关系？有没有觉察？然后再来呢，可能是你对某个文化的态度，自己的文化还有他人的文化。还有再来就讲到知识，对你对这个文化你有什么了解啊？然后再来最后一个是你的技能，你有没有办法呢跟其他文化的人沟通？不过在这里我要先强调说，有时候我们讲文化不一定是可能跨国的文化，也有可能是呢我们在一个可能说班级里面。大家都来自不同的，你知道，可能有像新住民啊，或者甚至是原住民啊，也有可能有特教生啊，或者就不一样。我们大家成长背景不一样的情况下，它都可以当成单一的一个文化，所以有大文化跟小文化，所以大概是这样。那文化能力呢，讲的就是你能不能呢去知道自己的文化是什么，同时是同理他人的文化，然后去进行尊重啊、包容啊、友善啊，然后让你和这个社会过得更好。那里面当然就包含了刚刚像是Michelle讲的语言，自然而然很重要了，因为语言是人与人之间互相交流的方式嘛，所以你能不能用适当的方式去跟另外一个种族或文化去沟通，他们能不能听得懂，这些当然都是非常重要的。
而且除了语言能力之外，其实文化还有涵盖其他的层次在里面呢。当然，语言能力是很重要，可是其实我们在了解文化的过程当中，不是只有语言，还有其他东西也需要知道。
对，例如他的穿着啊，还有例如说他的文化习俗啊，还有一些很小很小很小很小的事情，就例如说，在可能说比较有一些文化，他们就可能不喜欢握手啊，有些文化可能就不喜欢面对面看着人啊，都有这些细微的东西，那这些都属于文化里面，所以不止语言，当然还有非常非常多。然后还有，当然像万圣节也是个文化，因为下星期就要到了嘛，所以稍微提一下而已。Halloween。
对，我用中文给一个例子，就譬如说，我问你，我们可以就是做这件事情吗？或者我们可以做这个案例吗？那有一些国家会说不行，我们不可能做，就是我们不喜欢做这件事情。那其他的国家也许会说，这样子进行可能会有一些困难，会比较难。那就是其实意思是一样，但是如果比如说比较直接的国家会听会比较难，他们也许会听不懂，这个意思是不行，所以这些细节是非常非常重要。
Yes. Jen, is there anything you want to add?
So the other part is asking why is it important, and I think that it's important to just realize how global we are becoming, through social media and through the internet platforms. And we're interacting more and more with people in different cultures and different backgrounds in different countries. And so therefore, it's important to understand the value and the importance of recognizing differences, understanding differences, appreciating differences, so that we're able to work effectively when we are, in our careers, interacting with people, or from different cultures, or even as kids, as we're playing or we're interacting on social media. I mean, there's a lot of challenges that happen, a lot of name calling, a lot of bullying, a lot of cyberbullying that happens online because of just misunderstandings between students from different backgrounds. And so the more we're able to really encourage our students to understand these competencies and train them and teach them and guide them in implementing these concepts into their own lives and practices, the more we'll be able to help reduce that type of cyberbullying and really learn how to work and understand each other from a place of empathy and cooperation.
对，我觉得这边我可以稍微翻译一下，就是说我们今天为什么要讲这件事情，为什么它重要？也就是说，其实你可以发现现在是一个全球化的时代，然后我们非常讲求国际合作，更不用说现在社群媒体把它串联起来。那所以其实当我们能够发展文化能力的时候，其实某种程度其实是在促进我们的世界观，那同时可以促进我们团队之间的合作，更不用说现在的小朋友他都很有机会可以上去那个社群媒体平台，尤其可以说到像疫情过后之后，远距教学这个是没有办法阻止的趋势，所以小朋友是更容易接触社群平台。如果可以增进他们的文化能力，让我们彼此都可以欣赏对方的不同，也可以包容不同，也可以去体谅对方，站在别人的立场去思考的话，那我们可以促进这个彼此的同理心，那相对的就可以降低一些在社群媒体当中的冲突，包含是网络霸凌。所以从小到大逐步的去增进这些文化能力的话，那当然我们就可以阻止未来网络霸凌这些冲突发生。So, okay, so I guess we have been talking about social and emotional learning. So, why we are talking about cultural competency? I just have this question: how does cultural competency relate to SEL? Jen?
So I think the more that both of these areas are being researched and studied and understood, the more that we're able to see the connection and the bridge between the two of them. So, with social and emotional learning, it begins with self-awareness, and a big part of self-awareness is your cultural identity. And then it moves into, social skills and social relationships. And a big part of that is understanding and being empathetic and respectful of other people and their cultures, and learning about them and interacting with people from cultural backgrounds that are different than our own in respectful and responsible ways. The emotional regulation has to do with, a lot of times we are conditioned in our own culture and we don't really see or recognize or understand what we think or what we believe. We just expect that or assume that that's the norm. And so when we see people who are behaving or interacting or living differently than that, we make fun of it, or that's where stereotypes and biases kind of get developed. And so knowing how to reflect and notice those traits in ourselves, so that when we're interacting with people, we're not bringing those to the table, so to speak. And then, of course, responsible decision making. How can we be contributing global citizens and working together to solve a lot of either local and or global issues that requires effective communication across cultures and investigating in local communities with the local culture and things like that. So there's really a lot of connection between these two areas.
Yes, Marissa, I know we know you because you want to promote SEL, so maybe you can help translate what Jen just said.
好，那我就稍微来，就是可能没有办法完全的翻译，因为脑袋今天不太好，所以但是尽量。好，那其实呢，我们来讲说为什么文化跟社会情绪学习，应该说他们之间是有什么样的关系？那之前有跟我们的 live show 的都知道呢，我们有讲社会情绪每一周它的指标，大概第一个是自我觉察，再来自我管理啊，社会觉察、人际技能啊，还有负责任决策，我们每一次都有介绍。那你会发现说呢，在自我觉察里面呢，自己我是谁这个东西，其实来自于呢他人。你知道，他人跟他人之间的互动，还有他人觉得你是谁，那这一大部分呢也来自于说，你自己对自己的自我认同是什么？那自我认同很大的一部分就来自于你的文化背景，因为我们的文化呢，可能就像说，假如你出生在可能台湾，那你就会有自己本土的台湾意识，然后一些你可能说经过学习而人与人之间的互动中学习到的这些文化。那再来所以你看自我觉察跟文化来说就很重要，因为它会想办法告诉你说你自己的 personal identity， 你自己的自我应该认同在哪里。那这个举个例子好了，像是我可能用我自己来举，因为我从小就可能出国了，所以对于我来说呢，我算是一个双文化者，所以跨文化、双文化，拥有两个文化，一个在西方教育长大的台湾小孩。那对于我来说，我寻找我的自我认同，寻找了很久，我的家在哪，我的根源在哪里？那这个就有跟 self awareness 有关系了，因为我一直找不到自己，直到可能说回来了台湾，忽然觉得说，I belong 这个归属感，才让我找回了我自己。所以这个就跟第一个 self awareness 有关系。那再来我们再慢慢的下来 然后那个 self management 嘛，自我管理，那这是管理你的行为的。那你多认识你自己，你自然而然就可以管理。尤其是在某个文化里面，你该怎么样去展现你的情绪，这可能就跟那些意志力啊有关系了。最重要的是呢，通常我们在讲文化，一定会跟社会觉察有关系，就是 social awareness。因为呢，在不同的文化底下呢，我们要学习尊重。大家应该知道 social awareness 最在乎的就是尊重跟同理，还有你可否给别人一个充满归属的地方。那了解他人的文化，对这个来说呢也是非常重要的。那 relationship skills 呢，讲的就是 communication 了，互相的关系啊，沟通啊。那你想文化会不会也占很大的关系？这个沟通。那最后就 responsible decision making 嘛。那我们怎么做出好的决策呢？那决策是根据我们外在的所谓的规范啊，还有所谓的那个叫做 ethics 啊，就是我们的现在临时没有办法忽然翻译成中文，
道德
就是道德，很棒，你看很厉害，对，道德，他的中文比我好，怎么办？
没有，
没有，Michelle 很厉害，对，就是道德啊、规范啊，也都跟这个文化有关系啊。不同的国家有不同国家的规范，还有不同的种族有不同种族的规范啊，跟那个道德观啊，所以呢，都跟文化有关系。所以只能说 SEL 呢也离不开文化，因为文化 is who we are。对，差不多就是这样。
对，
希望这样更加了解。
对，我觉得今天讲的非常非常的有趣，然后我不禁让我想到，就是说，其实台湾最近有一个政策是希望2030年之前要变成是一个双语国家。那我有点好奇，因为其实自从这个政策之后，其实很多的学校开始在讨论怎么样子加入更多的英语的教材，然后聘任更多的外语的老师。我没有听过台湾的教育者或者是现在的学校在谈论有关于文化素养或文化能力这件事情，或者是有，可是好像很少在这个政策当中听到相关的东西，所以我有点好奇，就是说这跟我们未来所强调这个Bilingual 2030有关联吗？会有什么样的关系呢 ，Michelle？So we are talking about cultural competency, And we know Taiwan's goal is to become a bilingual nation by 2030. So how does it relate to it?
很大的关系 it's very much interconnected. So language is a tool, right? You use language to communicate. However, I see it as more as a tool rather than the end goal. So if you really want to get from the government to the education department, and then all the schools, and then down to the teachers as well as the parents, we can call them stakeholders, and then moving on to the students. If you want everybody to be on board and really work hard together to move forward in this bilingual nation goal, it definitely has to be combined with, first of all, curiosity, enthusiasm about various cultures, and then combined with increased exposure to cultural awareness, intercultural training, and acceptance, as well as real time practice of standing in other people's shoes and using different viewpoints to judge not only the world, but also what is the meaning of education, and then what do you do with that education once you've gone through that process. So from my perspective, a bilingual nation, regardless of what language it is, must be combined with cultural training.
了解，就是双语的这件事情，它其实应该要跟这个文化底蕴一起来考量，因为其实语言只是工具，而真正就是说你到底要用这个语言来沟通些什么，你能不能站在对方的角度去思考，能不能够精准去表达你的情绪？那很多这些一连串的东西都是有很多文化的意涵在里面。那所以其实我们训练孩子的文化能力，可以说是一件非常重要的事情。所以我还有一件事情，就是说刚才在 Jane 当中，在谈论过程当中，他有提到是说，如果我们没有去了解对方的文化，在我们跟人家相处的时候，可能会有一些 bias 存在。那我这个地方就有点好奇，就是说怎么样子叫做一个 bias？是不是Jane 可以告诉我们，就是它是什么，然后我们又该怎么样子去辨识它呢？ So Jen, you just talk about bias if we don't have cultural competency. So what is cultural bias and how do I recognize it?
So similar to Michelle's analogy in the beginning with the fish and water, we grow up in a culture and an environment in our families in the country that we grow up in, and that's our norm. The food that we eat, the church or place that we go to worship, that type of house that we live in, the language we use, all of this is what is normal to us. And so as we grow up, we are conditioned to think that this is what is normal for everyone around the world. And we kind of live in this bubble, so to speak, this cultural bubble that this is normal. And so therefore we associate that with being right or being correct or being the only way. And then when we meet or see or interact with people who are from different cultures where their norm was very different than ours, we have this concept that they're wrong or they're bad or they're different. And so that really can start to create a lot of challenges amongst people, amongst relationships, amongst communication, because we're all coming from our own kind of scope of understanding what normal and what correct and what right is. But each person on the planet and from every culture has that perspective, right? And so if not trained and not conditioned to see and understand this, then we can technically see a lot of everybody else is kind of like the enemy. And it creates animosity and things like that. And so that's what cultural bias is just knowing that every single person on this planet has cultural bias because we were all raised in our own cultural bubble, which we identify as normal. And so ways that you can start recognizing that is when you see and interact with people who are different, notice the thoughts that are coming to your mind, notice the stereotypes, notice the judgments, notice the, because it kind of does start off negative until we start catching ourselves and retraining ourselves to start seeing things as different and understanding them more deeply. And then the more we understand them, the more we're able to appreciate them. And then we can really see the beautification of the fabrics of culture and how they blend together and make our world so much more dynamic and unique and amazing. But that takes training to really understand the world in that way.
OK，所以我想我们生活在自己的文化当中，所以当然我们会习惯我们周边的生活，会认为我们所看到、接触到的跟人的互动方式都是我们所谓的正常。那但是呢，我们其实是生活在一个文化的泡泡里面，就像旅游泡泡，我们有自己的生活的方式，这些生活方式跟规范形塑了我们自己的文化。那所以呢，当然我自己觉得正确的在别的国家或别的文化当中，不见得代表正确。那所以这个就是会产生所谓的文化的偏差或者是偏见或者是有一些固化的这个的想象就会出现。好像我们常常会说英国人就是怎么样怎么样怎样日本人就是怎么样怎么样怎样。那怎么样子可以去了解说我们是不是有存在文化的偏差或偏见呢？那很简单的方法就是我们能够促进自己跟别的文化的人互相交流的机会。那有这个互相交流的机会，我们就可以知道说，我们自己跟别人到底不一样在什么地方，这样子。Marisa， 你有什么东西要补充的呢？
好，我可以就是补充一些例子好了。就像刚刚 Jane 分享说，每一个人都会有呢，应该说某程度上都会有文化偏见的，不可能完全没有的。就像说我拿我自己举例好了，就像说，因为我从小不是在可能印度的文化长大，所以当他们用徒手吃饭的时候呢，我却做不到这一点，对不对？好，那你做不到这一点的时候呢，那你对他有什么看法呢？这大概就是所谓的，有一些可能你不太能接受的事情，它可能就有一点小偏见，那你可能就需要去吸收、去接纳，然后去看到你这些所谓的偏见。那我举一个比较实际的例子好了，我当时在美国的时候，就是我们曾经有上过一门课，叫做就也是跨文化，那我们讲的是 microaggression， 就是不由自主的会不小心的去攻击到人家，讲 microaggression 嘛。那美国的话，那很多就是有所谓的黑人文化。可是呢，在黑人文化对我们的理解就是他们很暴力，对不对？然后很可怕。所以有一年呢，我跟我的朋友们，我们就开车就到了，就是很像一个地方吧。然后我们那里呢，就忽然之间我们在停车的时候，有一个人就在那里一直敲门，然后是黑人，然后就想要叫我们那是我们车上是4个女生，我们第一个想法就是完蛋了，他要对我们做什么？所以我们赶快把窗户给卷起，就是往上拉起来。结果呢，没想到他只是要告诉我们说呢，你没有开车灯。你看这是不是就是文化偏见？因为是晚上没有开车灯，他其实根本没有想要就是攻击我们或什么的。但是因为我们理解到的就是，可能曾经就是莫名，就是我们也没有想要有那个偏见的想法，但是就会不由自主的就这样。那发生这些事情怎么办呢？回去的时候，请记得自我反省、自我检讨一下。有这些偏见是没有关系的，那是因为我们也很难制止自己的文化。那最好的方式呢，当然就是多认识。当你多认识，假如说你现在有越来越多可能说属于应该说那个黑人朋友的话，你可能会发现说，可能不会像你想的一样，他们每一个人都是那么暴力的，对不对？这样你就会降低你所谓的那个文化偏见。所以越去认识一个文化，你就会发现那个文化的不一样。对，这大概是我的一些经历。
Okay, so that's a very interesting question coming up to my mind. So Jen, Michelle, you are living in Taiwan right now, right? So I just curious about have you ever experienced any like cultural shock or cultural bias in Taiwan?
Michelle, you can go first.
I, yeah, yes. As both of you were mentioning before, it's impossible for any culture not to. However, I don't think I've encountered any like negative discrimination or anything that made me feel uncomfortable. But there's a few sort of stereotypes that most foreigners will encounter. You know, like you get into the taxi and it's like,哦，你从哪里来的？哦，你的中文很好。哎，你在台湾多久？哎，你结婚了吗？哎，你是什么工作？You know, all these questions, and these kind of personal questions, like right off the bat, like the first time you meet someone, is for most Westerners a little bit surprising. But now, like I've been here enough time, I'm willing to tell people my life story. It's okay. But I remember one situation that was kind of interesting. I got into a taxi on the Mid Autumn Festival, Zhangqiujie, and the taxi driver said, 哎，今天在美国是中秋节吗？ And I said, 哦，今天没有，美国人没有，不会过中秋节。And then he asked me, 所以今天在美国会有月亮吗？ And I said, 有，今天美国的月亮也很圆。I said, 哦，是，那你们不会烤肉？ I said, 没有。So these types of small things like, oh, we have a different custom, the culture is different, but will the moon be the same? So I hope you can understand my analogy to explain that sometimes uh, when people try to interact in Taiwan with someone from a different culture, they try very hard to understand that person's background, but sometimes it feels like there's a little bit of a gap. But this isn't like an issue that's personally like only for Taiwanese people. You'll encounter this in any country where people are trying to be friendly to you, but they're not very familiar with your culture. Yes. But in terms of like friendliness, I'd say like Taiwan gets like the stamp number one for sure.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, I think it does take some getting used to. Both Michelle and I lived in Japan before living here in Taiwan as well. And Japan was my first international country to visit and to live in. And wow, yeah, like when you first go, it's 180 degrees different than what we grew up in. And, you know, in Japan, they even drive on the opposite side of the road. So it's, you know, it does take a lot of time to adjust. You know, culture shock is real. And now when I go home, though, I have reverse culture shock, which is like, oh, wait, where's the chopsticks? You know, like I look for that on the table and it's not there, you know, like that's just a simple example. But, you know, you just get so kind of used and accustomed to doing things. Once you immerse yourself in another culture, then that what you grew up with almost seems foreign.
For sure.
So,
Agree.
yeah, it takes time to adjust, but that's okay. You know, I think part of just that cultural bias is recognizing like what am I bringing to this culture from my own background, and how can I kind of put that down a little bit and observe what other people are doing and how they're doing it. You know, Michelle talked earlier with us today about mirroring, and maybe we'll talk about that too. But just being and not getting offended. So for me, I get stared at all the time, you know, and especially if we go into some of the more rural parts of Taiwan where there really aren't a lot of foreigners living there. You know, here in Taichung and in Taipei, it's more international culture cities, and so it's not as obvious sometimes. But there are days where it's just kind of like, okay, it's okay. They're just looking. So I just wave, you know, and that either makes them really uncomfortable and they look away, or they wave back.
Okay, so Now I know cultural competency is very important in today's world, especially if you want to become a bilingual nation and we want to communicate with people from other countries. But in Taiwan, if I'm a teacher, I am curious about which teacher should be responsible for teaching cultural competency in their schools. Is it English teacher? Maybe.
Yes, it can start with the English teacher, but I mean, kind of the same as what we've talked about and shared with the SEL competencies. Ultimately, it's everyone's responsibility to teach these skills, to guide students into recognizing it in themselves and to grow these skills. So, I mean, the short answer is whether you're a homeroom teacher, a science teacher, a computer teacher, or the school counselor, or a parent, we all have this responsibility to help our students and our children really understand that the global vastness and the diversity that exists in the world that we're all global citizens of. We're all humans, we're all here. We all have the same basic needs, from a psychological perspective. We're all doing the best we can with the conditions that we've been raised in. And so I do think that it really is everybody's responsibility to contribute to that. But the first part and the first step in teaching others is first teaching yourself, and learning for yourself and understanding and recognizing for yourself. And I know, Michelle, you've got more to say about that, so go ahead.
Yes, I agree with Genevieve completely. So about that, definitely everything must start from yourself, regardless of whether it's SEL or cultural competencies. So my viewpoint is that before teachers should think about taking cultural competencies and incorporating it into their curriculum, they should first go through this process themselves. And before you even begin to learn about another culture, you actually surprisingly need to learn about your own. Because as we talked about earlier, when you're just in your own culture, there's not really like an understanding of how that is different or what is unique about that. So my suggestion would be all teachers at all levels, regardless of what subjects they're teaching, would benefit a lot from going through an intercultural competency training program. And then once they have been through that experience and understood it on an experiential level, then they can choose how they want to take that with their curriculum and use that in an appropriate way for their age level and for the topic which they're focused on.
所以其实哪一个老师可以来教这个文化能力呢？其实可能大家都想说是英文老师，但也没有错哦。不过其实就像 SEL 一样，应该是所有的老师、所有科目的老师，不管是导师啊、英文老师，或者甚至是理化老师、自然老师，其实都可以来教文化能力。而最有趣的一点就是说，当我们在讲这种文化交流的能力的时候，其实应该要先从了解我们自己开始哦。那这是很特别的一件事情。我们常常会说，越在地越国际哦。你越能够了解自己的文化，你就越可以去知道是说，当我在跟其他国家交流的话，我自己有什么可以跟人家来做交流，然后我们可以在怎么样的一种基础当中来进行那个讨论。那当然，在做这个文化能力的时候，老师还是必须要经过一些训练的课程。只要老师有经过一些教育训练的课程，那未来他就可以知道说，在他的课程当中应该要去萃取出哪些部分，然后可以针对哪些年龄层的学生来进行这样子的一种这种文化能力的这个培养。
我可以补充一点吗？
当然，当然。
Okay, 谢谢. So I want to add one more thing, which is now with this bilingual 2030 mission that Taiwan is focused on, a lot of times there will be co-teachers. So sometimes there will be a Taiwanese teacher and a foreign teacher. They might be teaching simultaneously or sharing some of the curriculum. And regardless of whether this is at the elementary or at the university level, I think for these teachers that are working across languages and across cultural spectrum, to have this background and this training and this understanding will directly impact their relationship, which in turn will, of course, affect the classroom. So I most strongly recommend to start off with these co-teacher classrooms as the most valuable contribution to cultural awareness in schools, and then from there moving on to the rest of the staff, yeah, teaching staff.
对，就是在现在好像目前我们在讲这个台湾2030年之前要变成双语的这个政策，我们通常都是有2个老师，有一个是台湾的老师，一个外籍的老师互相来做合作，然后像这样子互相合作的结果，也会把这样子的一种成效可以提升。我不知道我的理解对不对，所以我想这个地方我要请 Marisa 来帮我补充一下。
Go ahead.
没关系，美笑先，我整理一下。
OK，就是说，如果是就是两个老师是互相，is it like co-teaching，互相教吗？互相教，
共同教导，
共同教导的话，
对，
这两个老师，这位是最重要先有跨文化的能力。如果
OK，
两个老师有跨文化的能力，那他们会影响到就是教学的气氛，然后就是也会影响到孩子的看法。所以我建议我们可以从这些就是like co-teacher 先开始，他们是最重要的，然后再来可以多想其他的老师。对，Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is just this like what we are doing, right? We are co-work together in this webinar, and this is
Yeah.
bilingual. And some people speaking Chinese and some people speaking English. All right. So as you mentioned, if you want to, if I'm a teacher, I want to teach cultural competencies in my classroom. So the first thing I need to do is to have a teacher training program, right? About cultural competencies, right?
Yes.
So can you give me an example? What can I get in this kind of program, and or what will I go through? What kind of experience would I have?
So, Genevieve, you can add more after me if you'd like. I'll start. I think the most important thing is that you will have a seed inside of you. And after you leave the training, the seed can grow. So it's less about like giving you knowledge and it's more about giving you an experience. So what exactly the training program will include or what will be covered will depend on which culture you're in. For example, if I'm teaching a group of Taiwanese teachers, then my focus will be start off with some classic characteristics of communication and historical background as well as thinking in Taiwan and why people communicate the way they do. And then from there, we'll move on to communication examples of different cultures, and then give some real life examples of some conflict that might happen between uh, Taiwanese and foreign teachers or between multinational groups. And then the group's task is to find creative ways together to resolve those conflicts and then come up with a training toolkit in the future if you're faced with this kind of situation or this kind of situation. How can you think differently and stand in the other person's shoes? So in a nutshell, the goal is to be able to recognize that if this is the way you see something, that is just because of your conditioning. But because another person is seeing something like that, it doesn't mean that it's wrong. It just means that it's different. So how do you get from here to here? And then once you are here, I hope you can follow me. Once you go to the other person's side and stand in their shoes, then you can learn to meet halfway.
OK，所以我稍微整理一下，就是说这个课程其实与其说给你答案，倒不如说在你的心中埋下一个种子，而这个种子是可以逐渐的成长茁壮的。就比方说这个课程，而且这个课程可能会根据不同的文化而会有一些不一样。那最基本的就是说，可能会一开始的时候会把一些沟通方式啊，或者是角色扮演的方法然后让大家可以根据不同的这种情境，然后来去讨论可能其中发生的状况或者是冲突，然后大家脑力激荡来思考说，这些冲突当中我们可以怎么样子产生一种沟通方式来解决不必要的纷争，或者是可以一起共同的来工作所以最后就是有点像工作坊 workshop 这样子，最后讨论的结果就会产生一个工具包，而这个工具包大家带回去之后就可以分享给其他人知道，或包含自己的学生这样子。So are you saying that each training program would be different, right? And I guess there should be a lot of scenarios you may face with when you're talking about cultural competencies. Does it mean that you maybe need like training program? You need to do the training program again and again for every year because you need to
Sure.
conquer with different barriers or different problems.
Yeah, because culture, no matter if it's, as we mentioned earlier, the big culture, the small culture, it's fluid. And also the global culture is changing. For example, the way that we communicated and the way that we operated and our opportunities for the future now, sort of kind of like post COVID-19 or post the beginning of COVID, is very different from before COVID. And that will apply to all cultures. So how you communicate and think about your future and interact with people from different cultures will be very different from even just 2 years ago. So this is definitely something that, just like anything, anything that you're training or learning about needs to be continually, regularly updated. And it's also very dynamic in the sense that, for example, if the group is a group of 25-year-olds, or the group is a group of 45-year-olds, or the group is a group of 15-year-olds, the content will also be totally different because their culture in their age group is different from another age group's culture, even within the same country. So one of the most important things for any training program that happens is a very deep analysis before you go into it, an awareness of the participants, what their background is, what they're doing at the moment, what their challenges are, and what they aspire to, or where their pain points are, and what they hope to grow towards.
所以看起来就是这个课程其实是要一直在可能就要实时的去上这样子的话，因为文化跟文化之间其实是很动态的，是比方说疫情前、疫情后，那么我们在世界当中人跟人这种社交的方法或者是沟通的方法也会不一样，更不用说针对不同年龄层这个沟通的方法也都不一样。那所以像这样子的一个 training program， 它可能是要持续的进行才有办法让自己可以跟得上这个时代的变化。So Jen, do you want to add anything?
So definitely the teacher training is important, and revisiting that training and refreshing it is important. And similar again to what Michelle said about planting that seed, the hope is that it's able to grow and you as the teacher, are able to not only recognize those things in yourself, but also gain more skills and awareness and understanding towards teaching your students how to recognize those types of things as well. So that's one aspect, and just scaffolding their growth so that they're able to start recognizing more and more about cultures and cultural appreciation and cultural awareness in all the ways. But another thing that's important as teachers, so from a classroom perspective and a teacher perspective, is making sure that you're introducing your students to cultures in various ways. So one of the easiest and most important ways is through literacy, right? And making sure that the books that you're reading your students or the books that you have in your classroom library show cultural diversity, different perspectives, teach students about different representations of people and the lessons that they learn and the experiences that they have. So making sure that the students that are in your class are being represented in the work that they are learning. So whether it's through reading or writing or storytelling or history or even science, So how can we incorporate aspects of culture into your curriculum as much as possible, and a diverse culture? For so many years, education was based around definitely like a white male perspective, and so we've been growing over the years and recognizing that that's one perspective, but there's so many others that we need to make sure that we're also including. And so really revamping your curriculum or looking at your curriculum in new ways and identifying ways that you can introduce culture through that as well with your students.
那我这里也补充一点好了，没关系。就是我想说，刚刚就有想要讲话，没关系，先让你讲。
我只是在想说，如果我是老师要教文化能力的话，看起来我的课里面教的东西不是直接告诉学生什么是对，什么是错，就像 SEL 一样，我们可能是要多用讨论的方法，来导入文化能力，是吧？
对，应该是说我刚刚想要回应的是，就是除了老师们可能需要受一些文化的课程，这是的确很重要的。但是我认为在教室里面还有一个非常重要的是，所谓的 culturally responsive teaching， 就是文化回应式教学。那这个也代表是文化。那这现在在欧美国家非常非常的有名。那他讲的是什么呢？是你能不能回应班上学生的文化，所以不是只是教学生不同国家的文化。然后让他们去适应。同个时间是呢，你能不能呢，就是应该说进行差异化教学在学校，你能不能相信每一个学生都能成功？这也算是文化的一种。他不会因为他来自弱势家庭就认为说他不能成功。所以这大概是一个教师的信念啊。那我相信不管是培训的课程啊，我们除了理解他人的文化、自己的文化以外呢，这些教师的信念还有包含他对学生的要求，怎么做到所谓的真正的平等啊，真正的公平啊，对学生的那些教学来说，这也是非常重要的东西。那因为我们时间的关系，今天可能不能就是讲非常非常多关于就是文化回应式教学到底该怎么教，但是最重要的是，就回到我们刚刚一开始Jen所讲的，先去认识自己的文化，认识自己的一些偏见，自己的 bias， 然后呢，再试图呢去换一个角度去看待呢你班上的每一个学生。那今天这个学生呢，可能来自弱势家庭，但是你依然可以相信他是可以成功的。然后同个时间呢，今天呢，你去面临了一些可能你没有办法接受的事情的时候，你再回来问问自己，你是否带有一些偏见，对于不同的，你知道，就是所谓的 culture 啦。对，因为我说 culture 一定有非常非常多，有大的，有小的，有小小的。那因为我们回到就是如果班级上的话，台湾毕竟不像国外一样，真的有这么多多元的 culture， 我们就只有我们小小班级里面内部的小 culture 嘛。那所以在
我觉得这个不一定哦。我们现在发现，其实新住民的那个小朋友越来越多了，所以我觉得未来我们要面对的 culture 不是只有一个哦。
对，我应该说不是只有，因为 culture 本来就不只有一个，就是包含自己在班级里面的，也都是很多不同的 culture。 对，那所以就是讲的，就是其实讲到最后呢，就是你能不能好好的聆听你的学生，你能不能呢去同理你的学生，这叫做文化性回应啦。文化性回应就是你身为教师，你虽然是教到你的学生关于他们的文化，但同个时间不代表说你不能从你的学生学习到他们的生活文化。你在教学的时候，可否邀请他们，可能来自不同文化的家庭的小朋友，邀请他的爸爸妈妈、阿公阿嬷到他们的班上去展现他们的文化，这也算是一种教学的方式。对，就是类似像这样子，只是稍微就是忽然想到。
好，谢谢。今天因为时间关系，所以我们就聊到这里哦。那我们现在会后有准备一个表单，这是给我们台湾的老师们。如果你对于文化能力以及这些培训的课程有兴趣的话，欢迎可以填这个表单。然后会后我们就会把相关这个课程的这个讯息再透过 email 来联系你。So I have prepared a Google form for teachers from Taiwan to fill out so that we can send them information about the teaching training program to them. So, but if you are fans of Nomad World, if you are interested in this information and want receive those information related to the training program, I think you can just message Jen through Know My World's fan page. Okay. All right. So before we leave, do you have anything to say about and do you have anything to comment, Jen?
So just being aware of cultural competencies and how you can incorporate that into your classroom with your students is really important. And we do have a program that's coming up over the next few months. We're preparing and planning that is called Responsible Digital Citizens Program. And this is a great way to help support teachers because it does include teacher training as well as students, connecting students across different countries and facilitating cross-cultural exchange through digital journaling with them. And so there's additional information on the Know My World page about that. If you have any questions or you're interested, please reach out and let us know. We still have space for more classrooms, and we would love to connect and work with you. So please join us. And also, if you have any questions regarding cultural competencies, how to teach them to your students or how to bring these skills into your classroom, feel free to comment, leave a question in the comments, and we can be sure to answer that.
Yes. All right. So I saw Marissa seems to have something to share, right?
Yes. Yeah, because I was talking about, classroom, culture. I just want to share a picture, which hope everybody could, 就是大家可能可以就是回家的时候想一想，反思一下这个问题啦。因为毕竟我们还是在讲文化嘛。那我们为什么会想要认识他人的文化？除了是要增进我们视野以外呢，是要取得所谓的世界和平或者公平，或者就像我们现在说的 SDG 的永续发展的那些17个指标，所要有一个 more equal and just world。类似这样，那我想希望就是大家可以就是看着这个图，然后去反思一下，到底什么叫做平等，什么叫做公平？对，就是像我们左边讲的那个图，你会觉得说，哎，这个就是大家所说的每个人都一样，但是在这个社会里面呢，就是因为每个人都不一样，才会有所谓的文化。那我们要怎么样去帮助每一个跟我们的文化不一样的人都可以达到呢？他们都可以得到同样的能力。对，这大概是在文化交流上面，还有我们为什么要迈进2030年，大家要先学好另外一个语言，才可以去跟他人沟通，这都是有很重要的关系的。对，所以只是留一个图让大家反思一下。对，
这是很好的图啊。Thank you, Marissa. All right, so Michelle.
就是对我同意，就是大家都要培养同理心，这个是对我们的未来是非常重要的一件事情。大家加油！
Okay.
谢谢。
All right. So, is there anyone who want to share your opinion, or do you have any question to ask? If so, please type in to your question in the chat box. Anyone? All right. If you have anything or if you have any question, so please send a message to our Facebook page, or you can send messages to Facebook page of Know My World. All right. Okay. Thank you. Thank you guys for joining today's meeting. Yeah. I hope we can have more topics about this in the future. Thank you.
Yes, definitely. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.